When someone mentions autism, why is it that we stereotypically visualise the boy lining up his trains and having a meltdown in a shopping centre? Would we assume it's the same if it was a girl lining up her Barbie dolls, or would we even question it? Or maybe have you noticed an influx on social media of women disclosing their new diagnosis of autism and wondering why all of this is a common discussion across all platforms? Well, I'm going to be looking into these assumptions and touching on something called the gender diagnosing gap, focusing on autism in females and discuss some possible suggestions on bridging that gap. Firstly, what is autism? The Oxford Dictionary's definition of autism is a neurodevelopment condition of variable severity with lifelong effects that can be recognised from early childhood, chiefly characterised by difficulties with social interaction and communication and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behaviour. Autism is defined as a spectrum condition, which means that the condition's features and characteristics fluctuate through a continuum which manifest in different presentations. These characteristics are as follows. Impairment in social interaction and communication, for example, autistic people struggle interpreting both verbal and non-verbal language, like gestures or tone of voice. Repetitive and restricted behaviour, such as hand flapping or rocking. Sensory difficulties, like being over or undersensitive to light and sound, and highly focused interests, such as an obsession with trains and planes or on a certain television programme. All these characteristics degree in levels of intensity and are assessed on the impact these have on functioning in day-to-day life. This gives a brief and basic explanation of what autism is, but society are now beginning to understand the breadth of the variations of characteristics displayed by people diagnosed with autism. Autism was previously classified as mild, moderate and severe, which has now evolved into high and low functioning. High functioning is also known as Asperger's syndrome, but many prefer not to use that term as it is believed that Professor Hans Asperger collaborated with the Nazi regime and referred 789 children to the euthanasia clinic. Until recently, autism without intellectual impairments, now called the high functioning autism, thought to predominantly affect boys and men at a ratio of 10 to every 1 woman. Kate Kale, who had a late diagnosis of autism, explained in her TED Talk that most people perceive the spectrum of autism to be on one line, with high functioning and low functioning at opposite ends. She discusses the complexities of the spectrum and how each person is different, and shows a spider diagram that displays the varying continuum of characteristics for people with autism. According to the British Medical Association, there are around 700,000 people in the UK with a diagnosis of autism, and boys are 4 times more likely to have a diagnosis than girls. We must ask ourselves why there is a prevalence in boys with autism. In recent years, there has been an increased amount of research on females with autism, as most previous studies primarily focused on males. One study by Simon Baron-Cohen, a clinical psychologist, stated the prevalence of autism in males was due to fetal testosterone levels and developed the extreme male brain theory of autism. He said that males are programmed to systemise and females to empathise, concluding that autism is the extremities of being unable to empathise and thriving on extreme systemising, therefore having the extreme male brain. This excludes majority of females from his theory, which is one of the key influences in shaping today's clinical practices when diagnosing people with autism. Further studies have discovered that there is a female autism phenotype, which basically means that females don't fit the profile that has been developed for a diagnosis of autism, because these profiles have been constructed with a focus on male behaviours. These are some of the differences in male and female presentations. Social motivation. Males tend to be less motivated in social relationships. They spend lots of time on their own or with other autistic males and struggle to form and maintain friendships, unlike their non-autistic peers. Whereas females are highly motivated in social relationships and will actively seek friendships with non-autistic peers in order to fit in. They will adapt to their social surroundings, but may also experience more conflict. Another difference is special interests. Males tend to have more mechanical interests such as planes and trains, but female interests appear to be more socially motivated, like TV programmes, celebrities and anything in pop culture, which overall are more socially accepted. Females also tend to have less repetitive movements, like hand flapping or spinning, which are noticeably unsocially acceptable behaviours. Females also mask or camouflage a lot of their difficulties. They can assess socially acceptable behaviours and adapt to their peers and surroundings. And finally, females are more likely to internalise their stress and anxiety, with males mostly externalising their emotions, which again are more noticeable. These differences in presentations not only delay females in receiving a diagnosis, but they also have a negative impact on mental health and well-being. Many women who are undiagnosed experience high levels of anxiety and depression due to unknowingly understanding why they feel different to their neurotypical peers. Many GPs prescribe antidepressants in hope that their difficulties subside, and on many occasions this isn't the case and problems persist. Some females also receive misdiagnoses such as borderline personality disorder, and again are unnecessarily medicated for disorders they don't have. Masking or camouflaging behaviours is exhausting. Some women experience physical and mental fatigue, and this can sometimes spiral into low mood and depression and has a huge effect on mental well-being. Girls at school are also flying under the radar, as teachers and school staff are trained in observing possible autistic behaviours that are recognisable in boys. Girls are being unnoticed and experiencing significant struggles with a lack of support. Anna, who is 27 from the West Midlands, said, "As a teenager, I couldn't work out what was wrong. I felt out of place and teachers labelled me as naughty. At first, my doctor told me I had borderline personality disorder, and also, it's just depression, it's just anxiety, take these tablets." She received a diagnosis at 22, but explains that she still doesn't feel people understand her diagnosis. Sophie, who's 23, from Derbyshire, said, "I got my diagnosis just over a year ago, when I was 22, but it was at secondary school when I first thought I might be autistic. My brother was diagnosed with autism when he was 5, and he attended a specialist school. I'd seen bits of his behaviour in myself, which made me wonder. When I received my diagnosis, I felt it explained a lot, which was good. However, I feel that having a label has both benefits and downfalls." In my own personal experience, I received a diagnosis at the age of 27. I had significant difficulties throughout my teenage years, receiving diagnoses of borderline personality disorder, depression, bipolar, and was prescribed multiple medications, none which made any effect. It wasn't until a colleague, a qualified therapist, suggested possible autistic traits that encouraged me to seek assessment. Since being diagnosed, I have a better understanding of my feelings, and I am able to research what it means to be an autistic woman. Information available on females with autism is fundamentally autobiographical, as there are limited clinical studies and research. This is slowly changing and becoming more prominent in clinical discussions around neurodivergent disorders. Francesca Happe, a professor of neuroscience, has dedicated 30 years of her career researching the neglected groups in autism. She has produced groundbreaking work in her field, and her discoveries have started to influence clinical practices. She says, "What we think we know about autism from research is actually just what we know about male autism." She has just received a £500,000 grant to investigate gender differences in autism. What needs to change? To begin tackling the gender bias that women face, scientists and clinical researchers need to focus on the different presentations of autism in males and females. They need to undertake elaborate studies of women and girls with autistic traits and re-evaluate the diagnostic criteria. Currently, studies are sparse. Medical associations need to be aware of the increased urgency in developing a medical understanding of females with autism, as it is evident that a decline in women's mental health is ongoing. Autism in women needs to be recognised and accepted more in society, and a more open approach needs to be encouraged to increase inclusivity for people with neurodivergent disorders. This is the same for girls at school. Teachers and staff will require more training on the differences of presentations and how to identify traits in their female students. This will increase support for female students and have a positive impact on mental health, and hopefully play a part in prevention. It is evident that there is an ongoing issue with gender bias surrounding autism in all aspects of society. Fortunately, many women who have received late diagnoses are speaking out and voicing their experiences, in hope to encourage fellow women and girls to seek assessment and for push for their much needed support. I am hopeful that relevant professionals in the health and psychology sector are beginning to investigate gender differences to possibly influence current practices and provide more opportunities, support and understanding for women and girls with autism.